I'll first of all say thank you for inviting me to come speak with you today. I really, really appreciate it. And on behalf of the policy sector, I do. I want to start with my goals and what we're hoping to get out of this from the policy side. Everybody in this room is probably pretty aware that come the 31st of March 2016, the vast majority or all of the contribution agreements are going to be expiring, and at that point, we're still going to have immigrants arriving, we're still going to have immigrants with needs. Obviously, there will be some services and services that will be needed. So what we're going to do is have a call for proposals. Obviously, it's a competitive process to get the best ideas out and so on. What I want to do here, and what we've been doing with OCASI over the last day and a half and the future day and a half, is what's the best way to spend that money? What advice should we be giving to our minister about what priorities he should put in his call for proposal? We've been consulting with you for a while. We've been asking your opinion because we don't want to make this in a way that, we come up with something and then you at the end of the day say, well, I'm not sure how to make this work. The National Settlement Conference, I believe many of you would have attended. Minister Alexander opened it last November. We've been speaking with you since then through the National Settlement Council. I've been speaking with the provinces and territories through our multilateral tables, and we've been getting lots of information. I want to point out that the call for proposals is a very large policy vehicle. That's a really boring way to say that this is one of the ways government can express its policy, through how it's going to spend its money. There are multiple policy vehicles going on right now. And so it could be that some of what we hear over the next, over the 3 days we're here, fits into the CFP. It could be there's other brilliant ideas, because as they were saying before, they would like some genius, and I'd love to see genius. And if there's genius that doesn't fit into the CFP, it could be that that genius fits into the federal, provincial, territorial working group stuff that we're doing with the other governments that are involved in immigration. It could be that it fits into our ongoing policy analysis. It could also be that it fits more appropriately into some of the bilateral agreements that my team works on with the provinces on how we help and work with each other together to settle immigrants. All of those are policy vehicles, and there are others that show up at the same time. So we're eager for all your views. We want to hear the best way to do things. We want to hear the great cutting-edge ideas, and also the old standards that work. We're interested in prioritization. If you could only do 5 things, what would they be? That's the essence of prioritization, and so very, very eager to hear and learn from your experience. On slide 4, please. So this slide is a bit about the priority setting cycle, and if you were to have one of those stickers you see in the subway that says "You are here," the "You are here" would be just to the right of that top box where we're on consultation on needs. Right now we're talking with you, we're engaging with you in deep conversations. This is an ongoing process, and at the same time, as I said, I'm talking with provinces and territories, and I'm adding in evidence. If you look to the far left-hand side of the slides, what you see is there's a large evidence gathering step. We're pulling together academic research, we're pulling together things that come from the federal budget, we're pulling together things that come from iCare and the APPRs and so on. All of this is feeding into recommendations to our minister, because ultimately our job is to provide the best possible advice that's got the most information. That could be a recommendation, it could be options, but either way we bring something to him, and then at the end of the day he makes the decision on, I see what you're saying, I've thought of all the angles, I appreciate all the consultations you've done, here's what we should have in the call for proposals, and then that's where the priorities lay, and that's where everybody sees the direction for the next 3 years. And so this is very much like you'll have seen in the overseas call for proposal. There was a step in there where it talks about the priorities. Same thing in the 2012 call for proposals. There was a step in there that is, these are the priorities. You guys all know about iCare. Not all of you may love it. Everybody uses it, right? Oh, okay, there's 3 people in the audience. Yesterday it was much better because everybody in the audience put up their hands, so yeah, maybe this is a rougher crowd. Anyway, I do want to point out that a lot of our work is involved in making sure we have the right evidence to make the best kind of recommendations we can. And although sometimes you may look at eye care and want to pull out my hair, it's valuable. It's extremely, extremely valuable for us to know what's going on, who's getting service, where the services are, what the needs are in a real-time basis. And I made this analogy yesterday that, you are in a privileged position. You know exactly that your efforts are working because you're with the clients or you're supervising the people who are with the clients. You have a passion for this, I have a passion for this, but let me be totally honest. There are some people who have passions for finance and frameworks. And a lot of those people work in Ottawa and they want to see what are the results, and they're not going to be able to go out and visit every service provider and see, did it work? And so they're looking for evidence. And the metaphor I used yesterday was I can either go to them with the evidence and say, here's what all the data says, or I can basically say, I caught a fish this big. And so this is the difference. And in the past, before we had the evidence that we've got through eye care, through APPR, it was harder to demonstrate to people that the money was being spent well. And so everything you're inputting into eye care helps us with that. Everything you're putting in through the APPR helps us with that. And so please continue to do that because we have a very, very robust story about the settlement experience in Canada and how it helps people integrate economically, socially, and politically. If we move to slide 5, you'll see that the summits across the country are focused on 4 pillars. The pillars are creating a welcoming, maybe what I'll do is I'll say that you may not see these pillars in the OCASI stuff, but it does map quite perfectly. Here, they're going to be looking at 6 themes. Those themes are welcoming communities, language training, employment services, service delivery modalities, health and mental health, and Francophone services. Those map very well to the 4 that we are gathering together from all of the summits that go on across Canada. And creating a welcoming society is very much about that two-way street. It's about working with employers. And I will draw your attention here to Article 3.1E of the Act, because I like quoting the Act, because I'm an old visa officer. This is the article of the Act that pretty much does all of the objective that we're dealing with in this room here. This is about people ought to be able to come to Canada, integrate economically, socially, politically, and so on, become part of a community. But it isn't just them integrating into us. It's about us as a society preparing ourselves and being a place where people can integrate economically, socially, politically, and so on, where people can make friends within their communities and outside their ethnic communities, where there is something that leads to citizenship and a real sense of belonging. So much of what we do involves creating welcoming society. This also includes the foreign qualifications recognition that Madame Augustine was speaking about earlier. Language needs of newcomers is gigantic, more and more academic, and our own evidence is demonstrating that the higher the language level of official languages somebody has, the better they do at all those integration steps I was talking about. Labor market integration is all about those employment-related skills and the other core services that relate to vulnerable groups. We were talking about the wraparound this morning and referrals to other supports in the community. If we slip to slide 6, that should let me pass this over to Pam, and I'll be back in a minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi. I'm going to take the opportunity. I have a very limited time, but and I do want to speak to the slides, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to welcome you here on behalf of CIC and to thank the OCASI Advisory Committee, of which CIC was a member, the OCASI Board, and the leadership of Debbie Douglas in putting together what I think has been so far, and I know will continue to be a tremendous, as Dr. Augustine said, summit. So we have I think that the commitment that they have put into this will give us some very, very good results, and I look forward to seeing that at the end. I just also wanted to say that, from an Ontario region perspective, this is really critical for us. We receive approximately half of all newcomers in Canada. I don't think that's news to you. But as our partner in the sector, this plays an integral role in facilitating social, cultural, and economic integration into our Ontario society. And we value this opportunity as well to convene with sector leaders to engage, explore, and exchange shared learning on the factors that contribute to or challenge the provision of settlement services. So I personally want to thank a number of you for having welcomed me and my team into your organizations over the summer. And that is where, as was pointed out this morning, it's not all about the numbers, but we can see and pass on to our Ottawa colleagues the good work that you do and actually sit and talk to some of your clients. That is absolutely invaluable to us. I will speak a little bit about the data. Derek mentioned iCare and the other work that we do through the APPRs. And as you well know, this high-quality information that comes from the sector, as Derek has also said, informs policy and program enhancements. And I guess the best way to put this is we can't manage what we can't measure. And I think that's a really important piece. But as you well know, data is only, the quality of the data is critical. And the iCare system is only as good as the data that your organizations put into it. I know that there were some bumps during the implementation phase, and I thank you all for your patience in working with us. I hope that you were well supported as we became the liaison point between NHQ and ourselves. But we do strongly feel that this strength and performance measurement system will be beneficial to all of us going forward in the future. We're better situated to, as we like to say, tell our story. And I think that that piece will help us to swiftly identify gaps and make collective corrective responses where needed. The annual project performance reports are also a robust performance measure. We pay very close attention to these reports. And again, to the point around numbers, when I report to my senior leaders on a quarterly basis on the performance of the programs that we deliver in the Ontario region, one of the things we do have the opportunity to do is highlight success stories from the settlement sector. And I will tell you that we take a great deal of pride in highlighting some of the work that is going on in Ontario. I think that we have been at the forefront in many occasions. I think of the local immigration partnerships, I think of the welcome centers and other vehicles that are now being implemented across the country. So I think we can take a great deal of pride in that work as well, and we take every opportunity we can to boast a little bit about that. So, to the slides, and we'll go to the Ontario at a glance. And for those of you who are looking at these numbers, I know they're small very closely. As I said, we do take in about 50% of the newcomers each year. But there was an unexpectedly high number of admissions of about 280,000 in 2010, and then back down to more normal rates in 2011 with just under 249,000 admissions. The largest proportion of permanent residents in 2013 at 46% were part of the economic class. I also think that would not be a surprise to you. And as you well know, the federal funding for settlement services is tied to the number of landings in the province, and for 2014-15, the federal funding for settlement services in our province was just under $296,000. Next slide, please. The yellow line shows that from way back, it seems like a long time ago, 2005-6 to 2012-13, the latest data we have available, the usage of settlement services in Ontario has increased by 1.5 times. And more than 150,000 unique clients have accessed at least one settlement service in fiscal 2012-13. The next slide shows national data. I won't spend a lot of time on here, but I will tell you that we will be able to, starting in 2014-15, provide provincial breakdowns, which I think would be of great interest to it, and of course using iCare data. Next slide. Projects reported by service providers in 2013-14, the department received 538 APPRs. representing 529 contribution agreements, and about 50% of those, or 267, were held by or created by Ontario service providers. Most CIC Ontario Region projects reported providing multiple components of the settlement program. Apprentissage de la langue était la composante de programme le plus fréquemment offerte en Ontario, puisqu'elle faisait partie de près de 73% des projets. We look forward to engaging actually in a more in-depth discussion through the summit on looking at these variances of Ontario vis-a-vis the other parts of the country. And I think that this is really important to have this starting point to start the discussion. Next slide. One of the really important pieces of our work, and again, you know a lot more about this than I, and that is the importance of partnerships. This slide highlights the ways in which settlement services and programs are delivered through various forms of partnership, and we have reported that over 95% of all of our projects and work involve working with partners to deliver settlement services, and those can be with community members, including churches, mosques, recreation centers, and associations, etc. And the private sector was cited as the most common partner. And I know that many of you will now have seen the call for, I think it's interest in the private sector for an innovative look at how we might partner with the private sector in the settlement and integration world. Partners have had a significant impact on our delivery of projects through supporting mutual client referrals, strengthening services through collaboration, as Carl was speaking about a moment ago, and enabling the provision of itinerant services by providing space in the other locations. I'd like to just comment a little bit outside the settlement world on the notion of itinerant services and partnerships. We travel to Northern Ontario every quarter to deliver citizenship ceremonies, and we have been very fortunate to develop partnerships with service provider organizations in the north. And the celebration of the citizenship ceremony takes place in the service provider organization offices. And this has been a tremendous reaction that we've received in the community. And it just makes the whole experience much more rich for our clients and for our new citizens. So I would like to thank you for that. And we hope to look at doing other forms of that kind of work with you. I just want to very quickly go to the next slide on enabling factors and promising practices. And again, just to drive home the point around leveraging those community partnerships. Raising awareness of service availability, we were struck to hear the numbers of people who just aren't aware of the services that are available. 50% of newcomers feel they do not need settlement services, but I would ask the question, do they know the services that are available in order to be able to make that determination? And of course, delivering holistic and blended services to clients to correspond with the identified demands. And over the last hours, we have spoken about the complexity of some of the cases that we are seeing and some of the work that needs to be done with all manner of newcomers who we are interacting with. Going just to use that as a segue into my final slide, which is in client needs, the most frequently used services identified were workplace-specific language training courses, job search assistance, access to employment counseling, assistance with transportation, access to affordable housing, and employment services tailored to youth, a very important group that we cannot forget as we do our work. I just wanted to share with you, just because the numbers are impressive finally, in 2013-14, we in Ontario Region have successfully partnered with the sector on 347 contribution agreements. That's a lot of work. And we have those contribution agreements with 235 service providing organizations in Ontario. We had 46,409 students enrolled in LINK. We had 20,333 LINK graduates And in the past year, Swiss and LSP services to just about 126,000 clients. 7,000 clients were served through Community Connections programming. Those numbers are staggering, aren't they? But when we're able to illustrate the numbers, the volume of work that we have, the influence that we have in the community, and the impact that we're making, I think that is really, really critical for us to be able to cite those numbers. So I will leave it there. I'll turn it back over to Derek to take you through the rest of his presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention and for your collaboration.
Thank you. So if we're on slide 13, I think, next one, Settlement in Canada, yeah. So I wanted to get to human nature a bit. It's human nature for everybody to keep their eye on what is changing. And very often when we do that, we don't realize all the things that are staying the same. And so I wanted to just briefly go over, like, yes, there has been an enormous, unprecedented amount of change. I'd like to point out the things that aren't changing. We have a federal skilled worker program. It has a point system. You have an ECA. You have to show your language test and everything else. None of that is changing. People are still going to be coming in with their families. It's still going to be some part of the levels and mix. Supplementing that economic category, we are still going to have the provincial nominee program, and we're still going to have the Canadian experience class, people who have worked or studied in Canada. Those are three things to keep your eye on. As Carl said this morning, we've been having around 250,000 people per year for the last little while. It seems to be pretty stable. Public support seems to be pretty steady on that. You know, if we keep on bringing in 250,000 people, then what you're going to see is that although, you know, it could go up from 60% to 70%, the number of economic immigrants, that's counting the principal applicant, their spouse, and any children they bring. So what that means is that actual number of people who have been tested on language, tested on their skills, tested on their education is actually a much smaller fraction of that. And in fact, you know, it'll vary from year to year, but if you say around a quarter, you won't be far off. So 1/4 of the 250,000 people per year ought to be those people who are going through the express entry system, which Lucille will talk about, and they will be coming in either in federal skilled worker, provincial nominee, or Canadian experience class. They will likely shift a bit, and they will be people who will be more likely to be closer to employment than the people we have now. That's natural. We've been retooling our system so that the principal applicants are more ready for employment because that's what we want. That's what they want. What have we got left over? Well, we have all of the spouses and dependents of those people, none of whom have been checked for language, none of whom have been checked for education, many of whom want to work, and so those people are still going to be requiring services. Family class is still going to be there. People are going to fall in love. People are going to want to bring their children after the fact of their immigration here. And that isn't going to change, and that is going to be a bunch of people who either are entering the workforce or are entering the school system. Same thing with refugees. We talked about refugees this morning, and there is a commitment within the Act to protect people, and that is going to stay too. So what you've got then is a lot of the population you've been seeing in the past is not really, for any reason we can see, necessarily changing very much. The part that is changing, the economic principal applicants, are they going to need settlement services? Are they going to be people who are going to be able to enter the workforce right away and never need to see you? As Pam asked, we're not so sure, because one of the things that I've been noticing is you need a certain CLB level to pass as a federal skilled worker. It's not a low level, but it's not a super high level either. The thing is, if you go to credentialing, you often need a CLB level 1 or 2 levels higher than you need to be a federal skilled worker, which means that people need you to get to that CLB level, to know the process to get through. After you're credentialed, I've been hearing from employers that yes, people get credentialed, but there's no labor market stick in some cases because the labor market, the level of CLB language you need to have firm labor market attachment is sometimes higher than what you need for pure credentialing. Again, they need you, and they may or may not know that. And this is one of the important pieces I want to bring. I will go to the next slide, please. Now, talking past and future and things that aren't changing, you're all very experienced and you've seen the sort of way we've done procurement in the past for contribution agreements, how we used to do them provincially, how there was more of a rolling sort of process. Now we've got one where we look at all of the applications all at once after having explained what our priorities are. This is going to be a part that is fed by what we can demonstrate with results and so on. And it includes all of the things we do, including Francophone minority communities. It takes into account multilateral agreements we have with provinces and territories. And I will point out, well, maybe I'll point that out in a second on something else. If we skip to the next slide, please. You'll remember from 2012, there were objectives to establish comparable services across Canada and to enhance program standards. A number of new initiatives came out of that. None of this will be especially surprising, but I put that up there to show that out of every CFP, there are innovative new ideas that get somewhat promoted. They'll have been piloted, they'll have been tried, they'll have been demonstrated, and then we see with the proof of principle, this one makes a total amount of sense. It's great value for money, if that isn't a term that puts people off, and it gets sort of made into something bigger. I will say, and we've been talking about Ontario's leadership over the last decade. I was told by a provincial government person either last week or the week before, they were saying, you know, I wasn't so sure about this whole LIPS thing that came out of Ontario. I thought it was just one more thing coming out of Ontario. And now that I've seen it in action, I really kind of like it. And I said, well, I'll take that back to Ontario. So kudos to the innovation that happens in this province on settlement, because a lot of the innovation that happens in this country happens in this province. And so thank you on that. On the next slide, I want to talk a bit about the future and collaborative approaches and where things are going. Employer engagement is a big thing on there. More and more often at national headquarters, employers are approaching us and saying, I need immigrants, I need refugees, I need people who are going to work, I have so many jobs. And we say things like, well, have you talked to the sponsorship agreement holders? Do you know where the SPOs are in your community? And they're like, what are those things? And so I personally am shocked, but then I say, well, let me put you in touch with so-and-so in this place or so-and-so in this place. And we've started making those connections because, quite frankly, I move too slowly. I don't want to be a middleman. I'd rather it just be a direct connection between the service providing organizations and employers. You guys have the labor, they have the jobs, I shouldn't be in the way. And so that's one of the things we want to continue to do. We're doing a tremendous amount of work with the provinces. All 14 ministers responsible for immigration, so the 13 jurisdictions plus the federal minister, all said in 2010, we want to improve settlement outcomes. And they've been driving all of those 14 ministries all together to say, when are you going to get us results? When are you going to get us results? What are you going to show me that's new? And it's really, really exciting. And I'm working very hard with the provincial colleagues on that. And I do want to point out that if people were to ask me on a crystal ball, what am I worried about? What am I thinking that are some open policy problems that we need real creative thinking on? I would say the critical mass problem. And that's what I call when, you know, in Toronto and Vancouver, you can have CLB 8, 9 classes. And in many other provinces, even in provincial capitals, you struggle to get a CLB 5 class together because you just don't have enough people to make it cost effective. So how do we deal with that critical mass problem, especially when we have employers in smaller communities saying, I need people, I'd love immigrants, our community is ready, but if you've only got 15 people going or 35 people going and they're all at different language levels, how do you deal with that? What is the solution to the critical mass problem? Because the critical mass problem gets all the way back to the bean counters I was talking about earlier, who are going to be saying, did you get value for money? And the other thing I think is super important is getting information to immigrants sooner. There's a lot of people who arrive in Canada and on the credential recognition side say, I wish I had known sooner what the requirements were. I would have started getting ready sooner. It wouldn't have changed my mind, but boy, I wish I had known. That's one of the things I think is a tough nut to crack, because people have got a million things to worry about, and frankly, we all have websites, right? How do they know which one to go to? I think there's a certain amount of thinking on how do we promote that and how do we get that out. If we go to the last slide, I will just use this as my version of Carl's speech, where I say, I'm really, really looking forward to the conversation that's going to happen over the next day and a half. Your staff have been very, very informative. They've been very, very creative, and they've set the bar very high for you. So good luck.